Hey everyone, my name is Nick, I'm the CEO of Doc, and welcome to another edition of Identi3, a podcast all about identity and Web3. And it's my absolute pleasure to be joined today by Dr. Philip Huff. Philip is with us today because one of the partners we're working with, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, has recently announced an integration that's part of which is using Doc's reusable identity platform. And this is in collaboration with the US Department of Energy and their Emerging Threat Information Sharing and Analysis Center. Very big intro there, lots of words. Philip, could you please introduce yourself and what your role is to our audience, please?
Yeah, so I'm the director of cybersecurity research at the University of Arkansas at Little Rock. Also the director of the ET-ISAC, as we'll shorten that for you, and the cybersecurity program coordinator for our degree programs there.
Fantastic. And yeah, could you talk a little bit more about ET-ISAC? I think if I got that.
ET-ISAC, yeah.
ET-ISAC, sorry, that's the acronym there. So yeah, just one more time for everyone, including myself, in fact.
Right,
yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so for infrastructure, you have, at least in the United States, which I'm most familiar with, you have information sharing and analysis centers, which are intended to be collection centers where you get a lot of threat information from the sector entities like utilities, and then coordinate that and identify maybe issues that are occurring in real time. What the Emerging Threat Information Sharing Analysis Center is intended to convey is that we're looking at technologies, kind of advanced technologies, and applying those to this problem. Maybe technologies that haven't really been considered. A lot of times, the threat intelligence field lags behind in technologies just because it is so sensitive. And so, what we're doing in a safe way is introducing these new technologies and seeing if we can improve the threat intelligence sharing and improve the speed at which entities can get information back and protect themselves better.
Got it. And is that lag then, Philip, because in something that's so critical, you need to absolutely make sure any bugs, any major issues are ironed out well ahead of time? Is that why there's a lag in terms of newer technologies being used within infrastructure systems?
Well, it's not so much the infrastructure systems; it's the threat intelligence itself. It's very sensitive from a nation state standpoint. Threat intelligence can give way to secrets, national secrets, and so that there's that sensitivity. But the sensitivity we're more interested in is the information that entities have, and the what that would indicate in terms of what types of malware they may have or what types of threats that may be targeting them. That's sensitive as well. And the reason the technology lags is because there a lot of the data and solutions are so stovepiped that it's very difficult to implement new technologies because they're really kind of behind the firewall, if you will.
Got it. Is that what you meant by stovepiped?
Right. Yeah. That they're really isolated solutions and difficult to share. It's also competitively sensitive. So, threat intelligence organizations, that is the way they market their services, and so all of that ecosystem makes it difficult to get information across boundaries.
Okay, got it. And so the energy sector, then, how critical is cybersecurity within that world?
Yeah, I mean, when you think of cybersecurity attacks and warfare, and even from a broadcast media perspective, the first thing you usually see is attacks on the power grid, and that's they're front and center, and not just in the scenarios that we see played out in broadcast media, but also in the national threats. If you have a nation state threat, they nation states are looking at disrupting the energy sector because everything else depends on it. When you shut the power off, when you shut your oil, natural gas, these things are kind of the base of a lot of society services.
And then, as I kind of said at the intro, Philip, part of the solution, certainly not all, but part of it is identity and how that's used within ET-ISAC. Could you let us know why tamper-resistant identity is so important within ET-ISAC?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a different use case than I think a lot of identity solutions. That it's not so much that the tamper-resistant identity is important; it's the organization itself. And I think that's kind of the distinction. A lot of times with tamper-resistant identity, you're looking at credentials that are going to last the person's lifetime and protect the person's privacy. Whereas we're not so much concerned about that. We're not really even identifying the individual as much as the organization and verifying that we trust that they are who they say they are within the organization. So the long time identity security is not as big of a deal as verifying that this organization is still a trusted member. So things like revocation are a much bigger deal for the ET-ISAC than, say, identity sovereignty.
Got it. And how accurate is it that, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you see or that we see in the movies, Philip, is like you say, there's often a kind of energy grid attack or something like that.
Right.
I think one of the ones that Francisco, when we were looking at the kind of researching this episode, and a great film that I really enjoyed actually is Leave the World Behind. And how accurate is stuff? I mean, do you cringe when you kind of watch these movies as somebody who's working at the coalface, as it were, or how accurate are some of these pictures?
Yeah, I still need to see that. A lot of people have sent me a lot of messages about this movie. I don't cringe. It is a valid scenario, and it is important to consider that when we automate so much of our control systems, that these type of scenarios are possible, where you can have this long-term cascading outage, and maybe have long-term damage to some of our critical infrastructure. And so it's an engineering problem that we just as a society we need to address better. I will say, if you look at what's going on around you, you don't see these attacks happen. You're not seeing the power shut off through ransomware attacks. That's not to say that that's not going to happen in the future, but the resiliency of these systems is much greater. And a lot of times the narrative in movies, it's very sensationalized. It's not that easy to break in and cause damage to these systems. There's a lot of knowledge behind the cyber attack that, in addition to the cyber attack, of understanding how these systems work, and each of these are unique. So there is a lot of resiliency, but at the same time, they are connected, and they are thoroughly researched. I'm not as concerned as like maybe a ransomware attack taking these systems down, as much as just the nation state sovereignty. Being able to protect your nation is much more important, because adversarial nations are looking at this problem and are looking at ways to disrupt the energy sectors. And that's why the ISACs are important, because they're looking at threats and risks that we don't see every day, and trying to stay ahead of it.
Yeah. And I guess that's obviously why there's kind of emerging in the title. You're almost trying to get ahead of these risks before they present themselves as as potential threats. Yeah, understood.
Yeah, it's overloaded. It's emerging threats, and we're also trying to apply emerging technology to stay in step with the adversary.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more about the system, or at least as much as you can, Philip. So regards to the integration, what problem did you guys set out to solve? What were the kind of main objectives and main aims of the project? Obviously, besides detecting threats, but what specifically is the system doing?
Sure. So we want to provide a platform that our constituents, which most of them are utilities, can share without attribution, and really the main barrier for sharing information more broadly is attribution. And if you think about as an organization, as a utility, if I'm sharing information about a potential threat that I have in my network, you have this all the time. That you have, hey, I found this in my network. I found this thing I'm interested in. You have threat hunters that are looking for these emerging threats, and when if they share that information and it's taken out of context, and then they have attribution to their company, then it can be embarrassing. But there's also a lot of liability. There's also um, public embarrassment that you need to consider, and so that's a huge barrier that just entities are not willing to share data that needs to be correlated, because by doing so they indicate that there may be a problem. And there's been numerous cases in the media where there's an overreaction to, oh, okay, so there's in the utility this happened, and they'll immediately go to, well, that means that that this nation was able to get in. There's a famous case, it's probably 10 years ago now, Illinois Water Authority, where a pump failure was associated with a VPN from that originated in Russia. And there was about a day or two of just full investigation. The news outlets were starting to bring up cyber warfare, and it turns out the contractor was just visiting his girlfriend in Russia, and so there's, I mean, and it just terrifies people
Yeah.
to share data when they're not in control of the information, and so providing a platform that takes away that attribution is very powerful.
Got it. And in terms of the attribution, so if I imagine an example where, like, an individual or contractor is working for a utility and seeing a problem that's occurring within the operation of that service, is that they're able to call out as an individual, as a contractor? Are they calling out not only potentially a problem that the utility company may choose to keep from the state or the government at large because they don't want the reputational damage? So is it protecting the individual inside the company, or is it protecting the company from who's reporting? Like, who's being anonymized here?
It's really the company. The
Okay.
credentials. It's like any identity access management solution, Web 2.0, Web 3.0. You want someone to log in for security purposes to protect your application, but ultimately we're not concerned about the individual. Other than that, the company has authorized this individual to use the application.
Okay.
So it's really more, is this company a trusted partner?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And therefore, if you know that they're a trusted partner, you know you can take whatever report is taken seriously if it comes from a trusted party, and obviously it might be investigated much more swiftly than one where it's unverified, and that may take longer. That's the real advantage that you're getting here.
Right, exactly. And on their end, they don't have the concern or barriers of sharing data,
Okay.
because they know they're able to share without attribution.
Very good. Very good. So what is within this system then? What is kind of UA Little Rock, and what is the system? What is it using Doc for specifically?
Yeah, there's not a lot of solutions out there that help with this problem. It's not a very common organizational problem. That's one of I was when I first started researching anonymized credentials and Web3 authentication systems. Everything is related to individual privacy, which is great. I mean, it's a fascinating solution, but the space that I'm working in is not quite matching, and so there wasn't a lot going on out there, and it takes a lot to build your own BBS plus blind signature system with revocation, and so we were looking at does anyone do this that we can kind of give people the experience of your OAuth authentication that everybody's used to, while at the same time um, uh, uh, giving some validation that their credentials are not being used in an attributable manner.
Yeah.
So Doc was I've used some of the open source work that I think you all have published in the past. Some with blockchain Merkle trees that were very compelling, very useful, and then I've just been kind of following you all as a company, and you provide a platform that makes it a lot easier and seamless for the user experience to authenticate and have some assurance that there's no attribution, but still have a good user experience.
Yeah, well, that's great to hear. So one thing that kind of people that are listening to this that may be thinking is, how can we have, and maybe you could talk through this kind of flow in a little bit more detail, is how can you have something where you know that there is a company within your collective, if you like, that is kind of reporting an issue without revealing who they are? How does that trust within that anonymous interaction work? Can you take us through that a little bit more, please, Philip?
Sure. Yeah, I mean it's a web application front end. I mean, very simply, it's a web application. They're putting in information that sometimes about a pseudonymous company, and sometimes they're just requesting assistance. The way it works from the ET-ISAC perspective is there's a request, there's no attribution, and so I mean there is the problem that I don't know who to reach out and contact, but it works pretty well because a lot of the services are broadcast services from the ET-ISAC. So if you authenticate just as you would in any type of Web2 scenario, and it just so happens you're using anonymous credentials, you still have access now to the application. I type in, hey, we're seeing this threat. Maybe we have this IP address, this DNS, these email headers that we want analyzed. And so that goes out to our ET-ISAC analyst, and then that analysis can take place, and then we broadcast that to the trusted community. So if that same company were logging in later, maybe even through Web2 credentials where they're identified, everybody gets the information. So the idea with this with the ISAC is all members are equally trusted, and so they all have access to the same information. If they want to know whether this specific IP address, whether there's a problem with this, then we can broadcast that to every member, and it's not necessary for anyone to know who actually requested that up front.
And is that then that will be obviously your kind of area of focus within is Arkansas? Is that just covering the state, or is there an attitude, if this works well, or for this to potentially expand beyond kind of state lines?
Yeah, sure. It's a platform. It's a problem we've been working on for years. Not just us, but everybody has been trying to reduce the number of barriers in threat sharing, and there are pseudonymous systems that will trust us. We'll put we'll give you an ID that doesn't associate your company, but that's still not really good enough, because you're still logging in with with an IP address that's from your company, and you're logging in, sharing the same information consistently, and so there is state associated with even a pseudonymous account. And by having fully stateless, anonymized credentials through Doc, this provides some assurance around the identity problem, and so we are doing it for a region, but also as a platform, primarily for the U.S. as a Department of Energy.
Yeah.
But it's an infrastructure problem, and so we're looking at this from a research perspective of how can we apply this solution more broadly to open it up for more inspection, and to reduce the amount of time it takes for these ISACs to analyze the information, get the data back. It's removing a barrier.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And then what's the roadmap look like? I'd imagine for systems like these, the stage you're at now, how would you describe the stage that you're at now? Is it kind of pilot POC type stage, Philip? Yeah.
Right. We are just about to release our first open web version, and so it is very much in the pilot. I mean, one of the things that's always been a problem with blind credential systems is getting users to understand what they're using.
Yes.
And the fact that they have a wallet, and that doesn't mean they're investing in cryptocurrency. Just getting beyond that conversation. I think Doc helps us with that, because it doesn't feel like I'm going into a cryptocurrency blockchain solution.
Yeah.
It's just that, hey, it's a credential and I'm logging in. It's a unique way of logging in, but something I'm used to. And I'm not having to put a password in. So that we're trying to take away that that image that this is a cryptocurrency solution. But we're just launching into that and getting users used to that. I think in terms of a roadmap, I would like to see this go machine to machine, where you have anonymous, stateless sharing of information, where, because the cybersecurity works at the speed of the machine, and the more we can make this problem easier for human analysis, the better. And so if there are threats that are identified that need to be shared immediately, you don't need to wait for business hours for that to occur.
Yeah.
We want that. It's almost an IoT problem, but not so much individual IoT assets. But at a utility, you would have a machine that is looking through your existing cybersecurity solutions, looking at potentially emerging threats, and if you spot something that's a problem, then our roadmap is that you would be able to authenticate that anonymously, share that information, that threat anonymously, and then have an ISAC. We're looking at cybersecurity clinics. I don't know if you've heard of that model. It's kind of like Google cybersecurity clinics have started at kind of a university model, where you take a cybersecurity program and have students assist the community. And so smaller utilities can participate in this. So we're looking to expand this beyond ISACs to cybersecurity clinics, any type of managed security service provider that they have a way of obtaining information without attribution, and doing it at the speed of machines. And just, again, reducing barriers, shortening the time to respond.
It's interesting, Philip, you talk about the kind of reputational, I guess, almost damage that maybe sometimes seems to sit on the blockchain industry. So it's almost like any company that uses a blockchain in some way, there's that like link to crypto, and therefore you get that really negative thing. I wonder sometimes even if it's worse in the US than it is in other parts of the world that are maybe more, I don't know, that the laws are maybe a bit more lenient towards blockchain businesses. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but it certainly is a barrier. So it sounds like there's going to be a big education task as part of this rollout that you guys will have to perform, not only with the
Somewhat.
users of it. Yep.
I think BBS Plus helps that because it's less about the blockchain. When you're doing anonymous credentials over Merkle trees, like on Zero Cash, then it's very much associated with blockchain services. But yeah, we work with very conservative sectors in society with threat intelligence and utilities, and they don't like innovation in threat sharing, and so that's
Okay.
something we have to be mindful of, and so I think the just having the BBS plus signature, it doesn't. There's not a lot of interaction with a blockchain, and it's a very
Yep.
easy story to talk with regulators, with contracts. There's nothing being shared
Yep.
on the blockchain, that you're not exchanging any cryptocurrency. It is just an authentication platform,
Yep.
and that's an easy
Yeah, it
story to
makes
tell.
sense.
Yeah.
And just for listeners who are not familiar, kind of BBS is the blind signature scheme, so it enables something to be signed and proven without revealing the thing itself. So just for people unaware, but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that sounds like it sounds like a really good way to, particularly if you're selling it or educating quite conservative buyers, maybe reassuring them that the blockchain's not involved, or the information is not there for all to see forevermore, is probably quite a powerful thing to have in your arsenal there,
Oh
Philip.
yeah. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
and you all developed some early solutions with ZK Snarks, right?
Yep.
Okay, so and that's where I started out, and it was a great solution, and it worked. But then when you go and say, "Hey, I've got the ZK Snark that we choose a blockchain," and that kind of shuts down the conversation. But with BBS Plus, it's not directly linked to blockchain. You're able to verify the credentials off chain,
Yep.
and nobody even knows you're off chain. It feels like it feels just like your normal authentication, and so that's a big selling point.
Yeah. Absolutely. And then, so zooming back out a little bit, Philip, what are the kind of types of threats that you would see or expect utility companies and organizations that work within the energy sectors within the US?
Yep.
What should they worry about the most, basically, maybe in your opinion, or what's the accepted view of the types of threats that organizations should really be watching out for?
Yeah, and I forgot to mention, a lot of my career has been in the electric utilities. So this is my research goals with threat sharing came from that space. And so, yeah, a lot of the threats are what the rest of the world is concerned about with ransomware. That's on the forefront of every board in the world
Yeah.
of the survival from this pervasive threat to every industry. I think the concern with ransomware is that it's so good at infiltrating your systems, and then if they choose to do something nefarious in the control system space, that's the concern, and that's if you've ever interacted with ransomware organizations or organizations that use ransomware, they will find every possible path to make it as painful of a decision for you as possible. They'll go after your executives, they'll threaten, they'll blackmail, they'll do anything possible to convince you to pay the ransom. And so for a utility with a control center, one of the most painful things that could take place is for them to be able to shut off power, to do something to your water supply, to do something to the pipeline, and so that is probably the biggest concern. However, like I said before, with nation states, when you're working with critical infrastructure, you are a target. If you look at the Russian-Ukraine conflict, the power system is a big part of that conflict. Being able to disrupt your critical infrastructure disrupts society in general, not just for defense purposes, but just for scare tactics. And so that nation state threat is a concern to any nation. That there is an adversary that is well financed and um, uh, well resourced to go after you. So those are unique to utilities, and that's
Understood.
That's a big concern.
Yeah. I'm certainly aware of like ransom attacks within kind of hospitals and things like that in the US. Are there ones that have been published that have been ransomware attacks with utilities in the US that you're aware of, Philip?
No, and the great thing is it's a very complex problem. So if you are a criminal syndicate and you want to use ransomware, you're probably not going to go after critical infrastructure as a first step.
Yeah.
There are signs that that's changing. There are some examples where they are looking at um, control systems that operate this critical infrastructure. But in general, it's not quite the same as like a hospital or a school system where it's easy to attack information, attack email record systems, and shut off computers. It's a much harder problem to understand the engineering that goes on within a utility and know how to disrupt it. You can't just go in and shut off the system. There's all sorts of backup systems in place. So if you really knew how to disrupt it, then that's a big concern. But the barrier for criminal organizations to do that is still pretty high. So it's not as pervasive as your typical ransomware attacks.
And is that why you're more concerned about the nation state level of, because it requires that level of resources and time to really try and, get through a system like that, I guess, is that why? Yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
Exactly. Nation states have the ability to replicate entire systems and practice these attacks. They hire engineers that can understand the systems. The concern is that ransomware is very good at getting into your system.
Yeah.
And if you can get into the system and then someone else takes over, and there has been signs of that the initial attack vector is ransomware. Then once they're in, then it becomes an engineering problem.
Yeah.
And so that's again that taking this back to emerging threats. That's the concern is that you have an adversary that's well resourced and it would be willing to go to cross that line and attack critical infrastructure services.
Got it. So we've talked a lot about the specific solution, Philip, and during that conversation, we've brought in some different technologies, zero knowledge proofs, and things like that are being used within the system. What other innovations in cybersecurity have got you kind of particularly interested or excited about the developments?
Yeah, I mean I'm very excited about the efficiency improvements in cybersecurity going on right now. Working with large language models, it helps the cybersecurity professionals, the organizations, to take a problem that's really becoming challenging to solve. Take a step back and if you think about all of the ways in which we have a proliferation of cloud services, of servers, of equipment, automation, cybersecurity professionals have to deal with all that. And as the complexity grows, the number of vulnerabilities grow, the number of threats that you're contending with, the automation of threats. It's very difficult for cybersecurity professionals to operate in these kind of silos where they're not able to innovate, they're not able to share. So being able to access all the power of like large language models from these very large services, a lot of times those are not accessible to cybersecurity professionals because you can't just go and type into your chat completion, hey, we at this company have, we're experiencing this type of attack. Very sensitive information that you're sharing, and you just have to type that into a public platform. and being able to take this natural language of cybersecurity, which there's a lot of, kind of like if you think of like a Slack, all the natural language that goes across the Slack channel, a lot of that could be interpreted, can be used for more automation in cybersecurity. It's a better understanding of the threat, of the vulnerability, of the risk organizations face, and being able to get that from inside the firewall to a collection that it can be used with large language models. That to me is what's really exciting, because then you can broadcast that out to the rest of your trusted community and be able to respond. A lot of the language or problems that they're having, it's not related to their organization specifically. So if they can take that information and make that more broadly known without attribution, then it allows you to have kind of these centralized services. Then we can go out to these large language model APIs and automate a lot of what they're seeking and send that back out to as playbooks for them to then feed into their automation, all without having to say, "Hey, I'm utility X, and I'm having this problem." It just reduces those barriers to enriching the natural language in cybersecurity. That's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, fantastic. And I guess hopefully we'll see that someday fairly soon, because it makes everyone, I guess, worldwide, but particularly the US, much safer as well. So
yeah, I mean, it's a world. You're right. It's a worldwide problem. The concern with this project and with DOE is definitely U.S. based, but I think everybody wants critical infrastructure to be safe. I mean, that is just a humanity problem. We want the services that the populations rely on for society to be protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Philip, that's been extremely interesting. It's amazing for us. We see lots of use cases for decentralized identifiers and some of the kind of zero knowledge proof technology that we've talked about today. But this is certainly the most, maybe it's the most interesting one I've heard. It's certainly the kind of least expected one. And it's amazing to think of some of the technology we've developed at Doc being used in this way. And to protect kind of national infrastructure. So it's been really, really interesting for us to go on this journey with you, of which it's just at the start right now, and hopefully it'll continue for many years. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we wrap up? Any kind of message that you wanted to pass on to anyone listening?
No, I guess kind of just to reiterate the like our partnership has really enabled us to do things that we haven't been. This idea of non-attribution has been a big problem that we've been struggling with for many years, and being able to make just put that in a web application and allow people to authenticate in ways that they're used to, and not make it a big thing to say, "Hey, you're doing Web3 now, or you're on the blockchain now. Aren't you excited?" And not have to have that conversation, but being able to give them the assurances that this is things that the W3C standards are developed. I mean, these are standards based protections that you have assurances around, and it really solving this to me. I mean, you could view it as kind of a small problem in non-attribution. It opens up a broader ability to protect critical infrastructure, and that's pretty cool. That's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. Yes, a small problem with a big impact, I guess, as well.
Right.
But yeah, we're delighted to be helping you with it. But Dr. Philip Huff, thank you very much for coming on Identi3. We look forward to hearing more about the project.
Yeah, thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you.